What if I told you that after 9/11, the U.S. government launched a secretive program, not to fight foreign enemies, but to track its own veterans? A program built on suspicion that those who had once worn the uniform might one day turn against the country they swore to protect. This was Operation Vigilant Eagle, a counterterrorism initiative you won't find celebrated in history textbooks, but one that sparked debates over national security, civil liberties, and how America views its returning soldiers. Today, we'll peel back the layers of Operation Vigilant Eagle, its origins, strategies, controversies, and legacy. Along the way, we'll bust some myths, reveal surprising details, and uncover how a program meant to prevent extremism ended up fueling mistrust between veterans and the very government they served. If you love immersive history, you're in the right place. Make sure to stick around until the end, because this story asks a chilling question. What happens when your government begins to fear you? Part 1. Post-9/11 America. The fear of the insider threat. The September 11, 2001 attacks changed everything. U.S. security agencies were restructured overnight with the creation of the Department of Homeland Security and massive expansions of the FBI's counterterrorism divisions. The overriding fear was not just the external enemy, but the possibility of hidden threats at home. By the mid-2000s, officials began to worry about lone wolf attacks. Individuals radicalized in isolation, often inspired by extremist propaganda rather than direct orders. This was new ground. The old Cold War logic of spies and infiltrators didn't fit. Instead, the threat was decentralized, unpredictable, and terrifying in its invisibility. But here's where it gets interesting. Many in government circles started warning that U.S. military veterans could be especially vulnerable. Combat-trained, disciplined, and sometimes alienated from civilian life, veterans were seen as high-risk recruits for extremist groups. This assumption would shape the birth of Operation Vigilant Eagle. Part 2. The birth of Operation Vigilant Eagle. Launched in the late 2000s, Operation Vigilant Eagle was spearheaded by the FBI with cooperation from Homeland Security and local law enforcement. Its stated goal? To identify, track, and prevent potential terrorist acts committed by radicalized veterans. On paper, it was a counter-radicalization initiative. In practice, it meant surveillance of veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan, especially those who joined or expressed sympathy with militia movements, white supremacist groups, or anarchist organizations. One leaked FBI assessment described veterans as prime recruitment targets for extremist groups because of their weapons training and leadership skills. Fun fact, one of the earliest reports tied to Vigilant Eagle, issued by the Department of Homeland Security in 2009, caused such a firestorm of criticism that DHS Secretary Janet Napolitano had to publicly apologize. Why? Because it suggested that right-wing extremism in the U.S. might see a resurgence fueled by disillusioned veterans. Critics called it profiling. Veterans groups saw it as an insult. Part 3. How it worked. Strategies and surveillance. Operation Vigilant Eagle operated under the FBI's Counterterrorism Division, specifically within programs monitoring domestic terrorism. The strategy relied on 3 pillars. 1. Intelligence gathering. Veterans were flagged in databases if they associated with certain groups, attended certain rallies, or expressed radical views online. Social media activity was monitored aggressively. 2. Information sharing. Local police, National Guard units, and DHS fusion centers shared data on veterans deemed at risk. In some cases, VA hospitals and clinics even played roles in reporting concerning behavior. 3. Undercover operations. Informants infiltrated militia groups and online forums, sometimes targeting communities with high veteran membership. This tactic later fueled debates over entrapment. Surprising detail, some veterans discovered they were on watch lists, not because they committed crimes, but because they wrote angry Facebook posts about government policies. This blurred the line between monitoring extremists and policing dissent. Part 4. Case Studies. When Vigilant Eagle Struck. Several high-profile cases were linked to Operation Vigilant Eagle. The Hutari Militia, 2010. A Christian militia group in Michigan was infiltrated and arrested for allegedly plotting attacks on law enforcement. Some members were veterans. The case collapsed in court, with the judge blasting the FBI's use of entrapment. White supremacist recruiting. The FBI cited instances where veterans became organizers for neo-Nazi groups. Vigilant Eagle tracked these individuals closely, arguing that preventing one veteran-led cell could stop large-scale violence. Online monitoring. Veterans outspoken about gun rights, government overreach, or anti-war sentiments were sometimes flagged. Critics argued this criminalized free speech under the guise of counterterrorism. Myth-busting insight. Contrary to some claims, Operation Vigilant Eagle was not an open war on all veterans. Most veterans were never touched by it. But the perception that vets were being singled out created lasting damage to trust. Part 5. Cultural and political context. To understand why Vigilant Eagle gained traction, you have to look at the cultural moment. The Iraq and Afghanistan wars. These conflicts left tens of thousands of soldiers struggling with PTSD, unemployment, and reintegration. Public fear painted them as unstable or at risk. The 2008 financial crisis. Economic despair fueled both left-wing and right-wing populism. Veterans, caught in the middle, were seen as potential organizers. Rise of domestic extremism. From the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995 to post-9/11 militia movements, the idea of the dangerous veteran had deep roots. Timothy McVeigh, after all, had been a decorated Gulf War veteran. These factors combined into a narrative. A veteran radicalized could be deadlier than anyone else. That belief justified the resources poured into Vigilant Eagle. Part 6. The backlash. Veterans pushback. Veterans groups were outraged. The American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFW, and other organizations demanded apologies, saying the program treated heroes like ticking time bombs. Congressional hearings were held. Lawmakers questioned whether this was profiling based on military service rather than evidence of crimes. Civil liberties advocates, including the ACLU, blasted the initiative as unconstitutional surveillance. A particularly shocking detail. In 2012, leaked FBI documents showed that anti-war veterans groups were monitored under Vigilant Eagle. Simply protesting U.S. foreign policy could put you on the radar. For veterans already struggling with trust and reintegration, this felt like betrayal. They had fought for freedom, only to come home and be watched as suspects. Part 7. Effectiveness and legacy. Did Operation Vigilant Eagle work? That depends on who you ask. Supporters argue it prevented potential mass shootings and disrupted dangerous militia activity. Critics say most prosecutions tied to Vigilant Eagle either collapsed in court or relied on informants pushing people into plots they might never have pursued. By the mid-2000s, the program became less visible. Public backlash and budgetary shifts caused it to fade into the broader machinery of FBI counterterrorism. Yet its legacy lives on in debates about veteran radicalization and domestic extremism. Surprising fact, some analysts argue that Vigilant Eagle may have backfired. Its existence fed anti-government conspiracy theories, reinforcing exactly the narratives extremist groups used to recruit veterans. Part 8. Broader questions. Security versus liberty. Operation Vigilant Eagle forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Should the government profile groups statistically more likely to be radicalized, even if it stigmatizes innocent people? Where is the line between prevention and thought policing? And how should a nation treat veterans who disagree with government policy? Are they dissenters or potential threats? These questions remain relevant today, as modern counterterrorism faces challenges like online radicalization, homegrown extremism, and polarization. Operation Vigilant Eagle wasn't a battlefield campaign or a secret spy mission overseas. It was a war fought in databases, police reports, and online forums, an invisible conflict between a government desperate to stop the next domestic terror attack and veterans who felt betrayed by the country they served. In the end, it's a reminder that the fight for freedom doesn't end when soldiers come home. Sometimes, the hardest battles are over, how a nation balances security and liberty, and whether it trusts its own citizens. If you found this deep dive into a hidden chapter of post-9/11 history fascinating, make sure to hit like, drop a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more immersive explorations of the past. Because history isn't just what happened, it's what we choose to remember.